Matthias and Julia, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. So I will introduce our discussion today on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. I have supported the work of Via Campesina in the last at least 10 years in pushing for this declaration to be first negotiated and then adopted. And now we are in the process of course, pushing for implementation. And since 3 years, I have a research project on the right to seeds in Europe, in which we try to use the declaration or make an analysis of the EU laws norms from the perspective of the declaration on UNDROP. So that's what we are doing. I have sent you a link on the chat. You will have a link on the chat to all the publications that we have published. There are a few publications on the right to seeds and intellectual property rights in general, the right to seeds in UNDROP, of course, and the right intellectual property rights in general. They are available in English, in Spanish, and Romanian, and there should be a French version soon. And then there are publications specifically on Europe, the right to seeds in Europe, and how we could use UNDROP to push for the protection of the right to seeds in Europe. And so there is a guide that we published this year, in fact, in the beginning of this year with Julia. And there is also a research brief, so it's 11 pages summary of this manual that we published yesterday. So it's online since yesterday on the Geneva Academy website that I have put in the chat. So now I'll say a word about and of course we also have submitted a contribution to the Inception report in June using this analysis based on UNDROP. So the declaration started. The whole idea of the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants started in 2001 in a discussion inside Via Campesina in Jakarta. The idea came from member organizations in Jakarta, Indonesia, and in particular from Henry Saragi. The draft declaration that they had since 2001 stayed as a draft for many years. And then we had lots of meetings with them, and 2007, 2008, in which we discussed and advised Via Campesina to adopt its declaration so that we have a final document that can be shared with the world. And that they did it in 2008 at a new meeting in Jakarta. And so since then, they had their own declaration, the declaration of Via Campesina. And 2008 is also the time of the food crisis that is affected many countries of the world. And so that was a moment at the United Nations when these kind of issues could be heard. And so lots of studies were produced, but the summary is that there was an understanding that the right to food that was recognized by the United Nations since at least 60 years were not sufficient enough anymore, and that we needed a new instruments to protect the rights of peasants. And the two rights that were used in particular were the right to land and the right to seeds. Since the beginning, the argument was that it is not normal that the right to land and the right to seeds are not protected in human rights law, and that they should be protected in this new declaration to be elaborated. And the precedent that we had was the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that was adopted by the UN in 2007. Okay, so we had it was just adopted before we had this kind of discussions at the UN, and so that was the precedent we used to say that there is also a need to have rights of peasants protected by the UN. And so negotiations started in 2012, and it lasted 6 years. It was 6 years of negotiation in Geneva with states, but also with a very broad participation of Via Campesina and allies. And the academy where I'm based, we were also able to support this work, to support the presidency, the negotiation was led by Bolivia, the government of Bolivia. during the 6 years, and we had the possibility to support this process. Also, we had the possibility to support this process because we are based in Switzerland, and Switzerland was at the very beginning against having a declaration because of the right to seats. Switzerland didn't want to have the right to seats at the very beginning because they were afraid that it would go against intellectual property rights, the treaties that they have already ratified. And also you may know that we have some companies in Switzerland like Syngenta. And so there was an interest for the Swiss government not to have the rights of peasants recognized, but that was at the very beginning of the process. And we did a massive campaign in Switzerland in 2012 with peasant movements that led the national parliament to ask the government to change its position. And so the government of Switzerland decided in 2013 to support the declaration. And until the end, they have supported and they have voted in favor of the declaration in 2018. So because of that, the Swiss government also supported my work at the Academy on the Rights of Peasants. So I was paid by the Swiss government to organize events and to support the work of Via Campesina and Bolivia. Just to say that the right to seats since the beginning was one of the main issues for many states. And it was very clear when we met with European states during the negotiation that the right to seats was a concern for them. And that, like Switzerland, they were afraid of that it could be contradictory to the commitments they have for intellectual property rights at the international level. The most easy thing what we did during the negotiation was to find agreed language. Okay, so that's why we also used the Plan Treaty that was adopted in 2001 at the FAO and used partly the Plan Treaty. Another document that we use is the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples that already recognize the right to seats of Indigenous peoples. And so we use these two documents and many others to frame the declaration. When the declaration was adopted, it was in 2018 in New York. All states voted, and in the EU, 23 states abstained. Okay, 2 states voted in favor, and 3 states voted against. Okay. So first, it's better than the beginning, because at the beginning, all the EU states were against the declaration. Okay, principally for the right to seats. So it was at least 6 years of lobby work by peasant organizations and allies in Europe to make sure that to break this opposition and to have at least some states voting in favor. Portugal and Luxembourg voted in favor at the end, and to have the rest of the European countries abstaining. And we had at least 3 voted against. It was UK, Sweden, and Hungary. Okay. What is important in this context is that first, the declaration is based on international treaties that these states, all the European states, have ratified. Okay, so these treaties are binding for them, like the human rights treaties, but also the FAO Treaty, Plan Treaty, also the CBD. So it is based very much, it's an interpretation of binding treaties for all EU member states. Okay. Second, when the General Assembly adopted the declaration, it asked all member states of the UN to implement and to promote the declaration. Okay, it didn't distinguish at all between the states who voted in favor, against, or abstained when the declaration was adopted. So the General Assembly asked all UN member states to implement the declaration. It's like in a national parliament when you don't have a consensus, but the law is still adopted and it applies to everyone. Then I will now share my screen and show you what we have in the declaration to start the discussion before the presentation of Guy on the specific case of Europe. So the declaration is this document that we have. So it was adopted in December 2018. It starts with long preambular paragraphs. Then Article 1 define peasant. What we mean by peasants in this declaration. Okay, and it's any person who engages or seeks to engage alone or in association with others or as a community in small-scale agriculture production for subsistence and or for the market, and who relies significantly through not necessarily exclusively on family or household labor and other non-monetized ways of organizing labor, and who has a special dependency on an attachment to the land. Okay. Then it says that it also applies then it describes the activities to which it applies, okay, including small-scale agriculture, crop planting. For our subject on seeds, that's the most important. Then we have Article 2, which is defining the state's obligations. Okay, and what is important is, for example, the 2.4, which says that states shall elaborate, interpret, and apply relevant international agreements and standards to which they are party in a manner consistent with their human rights obligations as applicable to peasants. That means that states, they should elaborate, interpret, and apply other international instruments, including intellectual property rights instruments, in accordance with the declaration and with human rights of peasants. Okay, so that's it means it's the priority of human rights over other international agreements. The second one that is interesting is the 2.5, which says that states should take measures to ensure that non-state actors that they can regulate should respect and strengthen the rights of peasants. Okay, so companies, even in Europe, should be regulated by states to ensure that they do not violate, but they respect and strengthen the rights of peasants, including the right to seeds. Then we have Article 3 on no discrimination. There should be no discrimination in the enjoyment of the rights. Article 4 is on the rights of rural women. There should be no discrimination against rural women, for example, in access to seeds. And then we have one important article, is Article 10 on the right to participation. Okay, it's a key right because one of the main claims of the peasant movement is that they do not participate enough in decision-making processes at the national, regional, and international level. Okay, so there is a right to participate in the preparation, implementation of policies, programs, and projects that may affect their lives, land, and livelihood. Okay, so that's a very important article to use in this discussion, because the issue of participation in this revision of the law in norms in Europe on seed marketing, for example, is very will be key. It will be very important that peasant organization can participate adequately. And then the article on the right to seeds is Article 19 of the declaration. It starts by the first paragraph is taken from the Plant Treaty. Okay, so it does recognize the right to the protection of traditional knowledge, then the right to equitably participate in benefit sharing, then the right to participate in decision-making in relation to plant genetic resources, and then the right to save, use, exchange, and sell farm-safe seed or propagating material. Okay, so that's really what we have in the Plant Treaty. What is important is that here, because in the Plant Treaty it says according to domestic law, according to national law, etc., etc. So that we don't have this here, and that's important. And that's because in the human rights world, human rights prevail over national laws and policies. Okay, human rights cannot be adapted to the national laws and policies. So you cannot have this kind of wording saying that it should be in accordance with national law. It doesn't work. It's not the logic of human rights. Human rights logic is that it should prevail over national laws and policies. Then there is the second paragraph is the rights of peasants to maintain, control, protect, and develop their own seeds and traditional knowledge. Okay, it's taken from the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Then a very important one, states shall take measures to no, that's not, sorry. Another important one is this one. The state shall take appropriate measures to support peasant systems and to promote the use of peasant seeds and agrobiodiversity. Okay, So while we know now, all of us, we know that in the last 40 years, 50 years, states have promoted commercial seeds, industrial seed systems. They committed in this declaration to support peasant seed systems, okay, and promote the use of peasant seeds and agrobiodiversity. Again, it's particularly important in the context of the negotiation of the seed marketing rules, because that's a very solid basis to say that they should be, as will be explained now by Guy. One of the options is to promote two systems of seeds, the commercial seed system and the peasant seed system. So that's very clear. They have committed in this declaration to support peasant seed systems. Then 7 is about the actual research and development that should integrate the needs of peasants and include the peasants it should be participatory, the research and development. And then the 8 is also very important. It's explaining that national laws and policies should be adapted to the right to seeds of peasants. States should ensure that seed policies, plant variety protection, and other intellectual property laws, certification schemes, and seed marketing rules respect and take into account the rights, needs, and realities of peasants and other people working with areas. Okay, so that's very explicit. It's in the declaration. It even mentions seed marketing laws. Okay, states should ensure that seed policies, plant variety protection, other intellectual property laws, seed certification schemes, and seed marketing laws respect and take into account the rights, needs, and realities of peasants. Okay, so that's, I mean, the analysis we have done with Fulia, and so that's we had published this manual in February, and now yesterday we published this one. It's a summary of this manual. That's in which we use UNDROP and all these articles of Article 19 to say that there is a need to take into account the rights of peasants when the EU is changing its laws. For example, in particular, the norms on seed marketing. So I'm very happy to have done this introduction and to be with you today. And it's a great momentum because we received yesterday the publication of La Via Campesina, ECVC, on integrating the right to seeds in European law, and it's a fantastic publication. So I'm very happy to be with you and to hear from Guy about this publication. Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you for showing us.